Hey guys, Fox here, and today it is time for my Week 5 power rankings for the 2025 UFL season. And we got a lot of change. One team stayed the same. All 7 other teams moved at least one spot from last week's power rankings, and it makes sense to why. We had a game that we thought might be close, end up being a complete blowout. We had another game we thought would be close, ended with a final score that said a blowout, but really wasn't a blowout, so it was really weird. A couple of injuries, a huge upset. It's just wild. So we're going to be, of course, doing the rankings as well as looking at each team's biggest strength. Of course, last week we looked at their biggest weaknesses. So without further ado, let's get started with the number 8, the Memphis Showboats. Look, man, this is sad, but they're number 8. The biggest issue for this team, above all else, is the fact that what I said as sort of a joke, but not really a joke, has become just a fact. The Showboats will, it's not like it might, they will give you 2 great drives on offense. That's it. This past week, they gave us 2 good drives. Now, you may be saying, so it was the touchdown and the field goal. Well, no, the field goal drive was incredible, but they had another drive which ended on a very fluky interception, right? It's one of those interceptions. It was like the opposite of the COC Mariner reception from last year. It should have been a reception, got taken, it was an interception. So that really isn't on AJ Perry, that interception, but that drive itself was a great drive. That's it, because their touchdown wasn't even earned. Their touchdown came on a botched snap on a punt, followed by a DPI on the Panthers. So they essentially got the ball at like the 6-yard line. Like, that's not a real touchdown. So they gave you 2 good offensive drives and then did nothing the rest of the game. Another big issue, they're dead last in third down percentage. Second to worst is 38%. They're not even at 30%. Turnover differential. Let me scratch that. Not even turnover differential, just getting turnovers. They still have 0 takeaways. We are 4 weeks into the season. They have not gotten a single fumble recovery or interception. That isn't just bad. That makes the 30% third down percentage look like an incredible stat. To have 0 takeaways this deep into the season is horrid. You are guaranteeing that your opponent is having 2 more drives than you are because your offense keeps turning the ball over. Again, one of these turnovers was definitely an asterisk. It really wasn't on AJ Perry. It's going to go down in the stats. It's bad. Defense. The defensive bend don't break mentality. Again, objectively speaking, their defense is still a solid unit. It's just that they're not getting enough sacks or turnovers, and so they're forced to stay on the field for a ton of time, and that's why they are up there in stats like points allowed in yards per game in terms of being near the bottom of the league. The fact is, if this defense could even get like a turnover a game, this would be a legit top 4 defense. But because they can't, they're just kind of stuck out there and are left to dry, and then guess what? They lose. And now they are the only winless team in the league, and the question is, will they win a game? The T-Will EJ Perry combo, it's what I feared heading into this season. I said in my QB Rooms ranking video that if you knew what you had in quarterbacks, and those quarterbacks were not at the very least on the great tier of quarterbacks, you were screwed. They came into the season before they cut Dormady with 3 quarterbacks that ain't none of them ever really play great football outside of the first game Dormady, or the one good game Dormady has all year. You cut him, again, he was still the weakest of the 3 in my opinion, or the second weakest, and you kept EJ and Troy Williams, who T-Will can be a solid quarterback, but neither of them are going to win you a championship. We saw that in 2023 with Troy Williams. So the Showboats, like, I wish I could say more, but it's not like last year, where last year they just were bad everywhere. It's the fact that this defense is still a solid unit, but they can't do the things like turnovers and sacks that you need to be a great defense. So they're stuck being a good defense with an offense that gives you 2 drives a game. That's basically been it the entire year. Week 1, T-Will and EJ Perry both gave you 1 great drive. Week 3, you had like 1 good drive throughout the entire game, and then you had the great final drive. It's what's happened every single week. So if you're only getting 2 good drives on offense and your defense ain't getting turnovers, but your offense is turning the ball over, you ain't winning. Now, their biggest strength is Jay Adams. Look, a couple of these teams are really hard to pick a biggest strength for, and the Showboats are one of them. They're just not great really anywhere. I would think about giving it to Coughlin, but he hasn't been as accurate. And yes, I know there was a blocked kick, but Jay Adams is the best receiver in the league so far. He did like almost nothing this past week, and he's still first by almost, or by literally 60 yards. So he's the number one reason this team is even somewhat decent on offense. Again, he's a big reason why they have those two good drives. Again, he has a touchdown. He has 94 yards after catch. Again, he is first by a wide margin, and that's even with having a pretty poor week 4. So biggest strength, I went with Jay Adams. You could give it to, field goal kicking, but it's pretty much it. Defense is just not good enough to justify it. The run game, no. A quarterback play, no. So biggest strength, I'm just doing Jay Adams. And yes, this is the only one I'm doing really just it's Jay Adams. Number 7 is the Houston Roughnecks. They fell back to earth a little bit this past weekend. Now, the game was close, which I was not shocked that I expected this game to be a somewhat close game. But here's the thing. Finally, what I've been wanting to see for over a year happened. Jalen McClendon got a legit shot, not coming in like midway through a game because of injury, came in early because of injury, but he came in having had almost no time to practice with the starters, and he balled out. His interception was at the very, very end of the game. It was on that last-ditch effort that Houston had. So really eliminate that. You have a 22 for 30 completion to attempt if you eliminate the interception for 236 yards. I mean, even with the pick, he almost had an 80 passer rating. Incredible. Look, Nolan Henderson was an upgrade over Anthony Brown, and McClendon looks to be an even bigger upgrade because he ended this day with the most overall rushing yards on the team, which isn't saying much because he had 17. This ground game's been really weak, but he still did and hit a touchdown. So he did have a touchdown, and he looked really solid in the game overall. Biggest issue, though, this team's defense is pitiful. Through 4 weeks, they are the second to worst team in yards allowed, and when you look at it, it's important to note that the bottom 2 teams, the Brahmas and Roughnecks, are just a country mile behind even the Showboats. And then points allowed, they're not the worst, but a lot of that is mainly just the Arlington game, 11 points. They've been better the last 3 weeks, but still not a great unit. Defense is pitiful. But I mean, man, you look at this record, it's just hard to put them anywhere. The Renegades game was a rough one to watch. The Stallions game, they kept it somewhat close, but it's just, nobody's going to argue that the team at 6, which you can all probably guess who's at 6, is a worse team than this one. The team at 6 looks to potentially be on the verge of having a run, whereas the Roughnecks, if they end the season without winning another game, it's not going to be too shocked. But McClendon definitely showed some promise, and again, we are at the midway of the point of the season, so being at 1-3, it's going to be tough to try and make a run when you have 2, 3-1 teams in their division. But again, they have not played the Panthers yet, so technically speaking, the Roughnecks are very much still in the playoff race, believe it or not. Because again, if you beat the Panthers twice, let's say they play them the next 2 weeks, both teams are 3-3. So the Roughnecks are still in the playoff race as long as they beat Michigan twice and don't really lose anything else. But we'll see how McClendon does, and that leads to our biggest strength, which is somehow quarterback all of a sudden. So they've had 3 quarterbacks. Now, aside from the 1 week where Nolan Henderson came in for 2 drives and did nothing, Henderson has looked like a massive upgrade over Anthony Brown. And then McClendon came in and had an incredible game. McClendon has played 1 game, and he already has more passing yards than either Brown or Henderson, which is a big deal. Now, of course, Henderson on the ground is a massive threat. Again, he has the most rushing yards, or he has the best yards per rush and one of the best yards total on the entire team, despite obviously not playing that much. But McClendon, he looked really good as a passer. That's what he's been. He was somebody that, again, people thought heading into last season that Quentin Dormady was this great quarterback because he played in a bad team. That's what Jalen McClendon was. McClendon played in an awful Vipers team that actually put up very solid stats, and as a Viper, outplayed Perez, and then got screwed by DC, never got a real shot, came in, from an injury midway through a game. He's been a great quarterback that just never has gotten a real shot. Hopefully he continues this next week, but we'll see. Again, a 70 completion percentage is always a great number. All of a sudden, seems like QB is the biggest strength for the Roughnecks. Because receiving core, you'd think it would be, but Sims and Hall, Sims is still, obviously new to the team, but Hall has just not been as great as he was last year. So, biggest strength, I guess, is quarterback now. Number 6, the San Antonio Brahmas. I told y'all they were going to pull off this upset. I know initially I was picking DC. I know in spring into football I picked DC, but I was like, man, I think San Antonio pulls it off in the end. I'm glad I picked them. Now, yes, the ref ball. There's a lot of people saying that the ref ball was kind of in favor of San Antonio in this game, which I'm not going to say it wasn't fully, but what I will say is San Antonio definitely got outplayed on offense. I mean, DC had over 400 total yards of offense. San Antonio barely had 200. But Kellen Mond had, again, a very solid day. This is not an incredible stat line. This is a very okay, solid stat line. 70 completion percentage, really good. Less than 10 yards per completion, you know how I feel about that? Not incredible. I know a lot of people use yards per attempt. I like yards per completion as a better stat. That kind of really shows what your throws actually did. That's why I say 10 is a great benchmark for you at a really good game passing, or you just kind of, had an okay one. He was solid again. He's looked a lot better than he did the first 2 weeks. He still does not look like an elite quarterback, but this specific year of spring football, if he keeps this kind of stat line up, he'll finish the season as like the second best quarterback in the league, which is crazy but true. Again, biggest issue for them and why I didn't move them above number 5, because I know some people honestly might put them above a certain 2-2 team. The reason I didn't, their defense is still bad. You just let DC put up 400 yards of offense on you. Yes, they had a lot of penalties. Yes, DC only put up 18 points. DC having 400 yards of offense with that talent pool, with that level of play they've been doing all season, that is horrific. That still makes me very, very fearful about this Brahmas defense. And not fearful as an opponent, fearful if I'm a Brahmas fan. Because, man, if you can let DC put up 400 yards, you play Michigan again after Perkins has had another week playing, or you go against the Renegades now and let Perez just dot you, or hell, even the Stallions, how they looked a bit better in offense, you're getting cooked. So, number 6 is the Brahmas. Hard to really put them anywhere else just because of the defense. Again, in terms of momentum, they have more momentum than the team at 5, which we all pretty much know who it is. And that's because of the fact that, again, I said it before, San Antonio is still in the playoff race. Because, again, they just beat DC once. They get to play them again. They have, one more game against Arlington St. Louis. But the more important thing is they have not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 home games left. Yes, the schedule, because of everything that happened, screwed them out of a home game. But now in this specific scenario, the last 6 weeks of the season, 4 of them are home games. You go 4-0 in those games, you finish the season 5-5. That might get you in the playoffs. It probably won't, so you probably have to go at least 6-4, but that could do it. So when you consider that, and that this is the win right before their home game, it could help kind of spark that fan base a bit, because there's a lot of people losing hope, and I said they were going to pull off this win. They needed this win. They got the job done. Number 6, San Antonio. Biggest strength is ball security. You know how many giveaways they have all season? 1. That's incredible. I mean, for how awful it is that Memphis doesn't have a takeaway, the fact that San Antonio has 0 giveaways is incredible. Again, they haven't even played Memphis, so you can't even use the asterisk of, Memphis doesn't get takeaways. They've played turnover-happy defenses. They've played the Battlehawks, the Panthers, the Renegades, and the Defenders. Again, the Defenders especially, we viewed them as the best defense in the league, and they still have only 1 turnover. Look at the Panthers. They have 5 takeaways. That's a lot. DC, they got 9. Whereas San Antonio, they just don't give the ball away. They have a positive turnover differential because they only have 2 takeaways, which isn't great, and that's really poor in the season. But if you only give the ball away once, which is that 1 interception earlier in the season, it's huge. When you're not turning the ball over, you don't have to be winning the turnover differential, but if you're not losing it, you're making it an even fight. The whole point of turnovers and why they're such a big deal is they essentially are giving your opponent an extra drive in a lot of ways. And for San Antonio to not be turning the ball over, it's the biggest strength they have right now. And when you see a team with 1 giveaway through 4 weeks and you see them at 1-3, it's shocking. Again, for how not great Mon was the first 2 weeks, even then he wasn't a turnover-prone quarterback, and he still isn't. So a lot of credit to Mon, a lot of credit to the ground game, a lot of credit to the O-line, and even the receivers for not fumbling, and hell, even you could say special teams and all that. Great ball security. Massive win for that part of play, I guess is the best way to put it for the Brahmas. Number 6, San Antonio, biggest strength, ball security. Number 5, the Battlehawks. Yeah, I don't think anyone's upset about this. In fact, I think some people might even have them at 6. I personally don't, but I wouldn't be against you if you did. Look, I said it last week. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and I said they were on fraud watch. They dropped. Now, before anyone says anything, 2 big asterisks. The Renegades' final score, and you'll see this where I put the Renegades, is very deceiving. Manny Wilkins, again, at least at the time of recording this video, I've been trying to find stuff. I haven't heard everything, but I've heard, back then all the things, prayers for Wilkins. He's probably done for the year, it looks like. Again, we won't know for sure. At least at the time of recording this, I don't know for sure, but it looks like he probably is. he went down bad. It was a non-contact injury on a QB draw. He's basically done. Now, when it comes to the final score, he fumbled the ball on that draw. Again, it was a non-contact injury, so nobody touched him, and he just dropped the ball because he obviously got hurt. The Renegades scored a touchdown and then scored 2. That's 8 points that they didn't really earn. Then at the very end, they got a pick 6 literally at like the end of the game. So in a sort of weird technicality way, you could actually argue that St. Louis really won like 15-14 if you want to be that guy, because again, they scored 2 points on both of them. The point is, yes, this loss wasn't as bad as the stats make it out to be, or the final score makes it out to be, but it mainly looks Arlington look a bit worse, not the other way around. As for the Battlehawks, they're -2 in turnover differential now, and man, Duggan did not look good. Yes, the interception, just like McClendon, just like E.J. Perry's, the second one is one that, yes, it was a bad interception, but at the end of the game, it's a bit more understanding to make a big mistake. The point is, he had a sub-50 completion percentage. He had less than 10 yards of completion. He basically had it, to be fair, but asterisk around. There was one play to Jacob Sailors where he threw it to him. It was an awful throw. Sailors had to reach super far down and barely caught it and ended up getting 15 yards in that play. You eliminate that because that should have been an incompletion. Then you're down to 7 completions for 60-something yards or about 62 yards. It just is bad. Speaking of Sailors, that stat line, he played well. That stat line is not great. 20 carries for 61 yards is not a good stat line. He played well. And that leads to the biggest issue I've had with this team, and that's the questionable coaching. Again, Anthony Beck in the OC. The decision on the final 3 plays of the game at the goal line to never run a Jacob Sailors play is absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, he's your best player on offense, and you didn't throw it to him. You didn't run it with him. You did a quarterback draw, basically, and you did 2 passing plays. Awful. Awful coaching by the Battlehawks. Again, the interception, it's why I said it's a bit weird, because it was at the goal line, they had a chance to win. It was the very end, but the point is, man, it's just not using Jacob Sailors in the red zone like that was awful play calling. That reeks of Gradkowski from last year, and that's not a good thing. Now, the one saving grace for this team is the fact they still are the leading team in rushing yards per game. That's mainly because, again, Sailors has been the most consistent RB this season, and both your quarterbacks are dual threat quarterbacks. Manny's more of a dual threat than Duggan, but Duggan can run, just not as good as Wilkins. So that's kind of helping out. And punt net average, again, one of those, stats that's important but not, something to write home about. They are leading that as well. Now, the biggest strength for St. Louis, I'm going to go with their kicking, and that is just overall kicking, not even field goal kicking. Now, yes, Rodrigo Blankenship is the best kicker in the league currently. He is the only kicker to attempt and make 10 field goals with a 100 field goal percentage, including a 56-yard long. Now, kickoff average. They're the 3rd best team in kickoff average, and of course, the stat I just mentioned, punt net average. So their overall kicking game is very, very strong. This is one of those things that in close games helps you win them. The fact that you have a kicker that can get you those field goals whenever you need him to. The fact that when he comes out, it's like Brandon Aubrey was for the Stallions. You just feel it's a guaranteed 3 points. And when you have that in your back pocket, it's always a great thing. A big issue for a team like Michigan is that, and what we also saw with San Antonio without destroying, which is, some people would argue is against it. But the point is, with those two teams, when they got to that no man's lane around the 40-yard line, they kind of had to question what to do because they didn't fully trust their kicker. Whereas if you're the Battlehawks and you have to kick a 55-yard field goal or go for 4th and 2, you're kicking the 55-yarder because you know he's going to make it. And if he misses it, it's a shock. And when a kicker missing a kick is a shock, that's a great kicker. Biggest strength of the Battlehawks, kicking. Number 4, the Arlington Renegades. They shouldn't really move up that much. That's why I'm only moving up 1 spot. Again, 2 of their touchdowns, massive asterisk. It was a pick 6 at the very end of the game, and then the Manny Wilkins fumble. So, very weak win in that sense. Now, as for why they do have an argument to be up higher is because of the fact that turnover differential, 2nd best team in the league. Yards per game, they're the 2nd best team in the league. Then in terms of overall 3rd down percentage, or the 3rd best team in the league, my apologies, in yards per game, and an overall 3rd down percentage, that's where the 2nd best in the league. Again, when you're completing over 40% of that, it's a really solid number. It means that almost half the time you are getting a 1st down and 3rd down. It's a big deal. So, they are up there in a couple big stats. Their defense is kind of solid. Again, they got a lot of sacks this game. Taco Charlton looks like a massive addition. He just came into the team and has already done more than Cam Carter has done for the Panthers through 2 weeks, which is nothing since he hasn't played yet. But Taco Charlton was incredible this game. Chris Odom, again, even without the fumble recovery touchdown, that asterisk, he still had a great game. So this pass rush is a very legit unit. So the Renegades, I get why someone would have them higher, but I don't think this win against St. Louis was all that impressive when you got a 8-point handicap, essentially, because of a player getting hurt. It just feels really weird to view that and be like, oh yeah, St. Louis is, man, St. Louis got pummeled. And it's like, yeah, but Arlington had an 8-point handicap and got a legitimate last second, not like last second, but you know what I mean, end of the game pick six. Come on. So number 4, Arlington. Now their biggest strength is actually their defense overall. Yeah, I know, shocker. I made it sound like it was middle of the road. I was capping. This is a very solid defense. Let's call it like it is. Points allowed, they're the best in the league. Now, the points allowed does deserve an asterisk, in my opinion. Again, they played Houston before, they got a real quarterback at play. And they played San Antonio, in week 1. So, asterisk there. But aside from that, very, very incredible defense. Less than 10 points allowed every game. Takeaways, they're the second best in the league. Passes defended, this big one, they're actually the top in the league as well. Again, 10 sacks, I believe, is second place right now, so incredible there as well. It's just that this defense is incredible, but I just can't put them higher than 4 because, again, while, let's say Michigan's strength of record is not at all decent, Arlington's defense has been able to play some very weak teams in regards to the offense, so their stats are a bit skewed in that aspect. Again, you just played a Max Duggan Battlehawks team. When you played the Stallions, you ended up choking a very winnable game. Even the Battlehawks one, it felt like they might choke that game away despite the fact that St. Louis was a far worse team once, Wilkins got hurt and we actually saw what Duggan was. It's hard to view, but this defense is incredible. So if you have them at 3, I see why. I just can't do it. So number 4 is the Arlington Renegades. Number 3 is the Birmingham Stallions. 3 and 2 I was debating, but for now I'm keeping Birmingham at 3. They got a close win over Houston. Corral had a better game than last week, but it still wasn't an incredible game. Again, barely above 50 completion percentage. He had 56. Did throw an interception, did have 2 touchdowns, did have 200 yards, but he also went down with an injury. And that was opened the door for Case Cookus to come in. We'll end up finding out more about Corral's overall injury this week, but that is something to keep an eye out for, is how healthy Matt Corral is. So they might be rolling with Case Cookus, which again, the chef cooked. He immediately threw a lead block or something. But biggest issues of this team is that they're great at points allowed, but their turnover differential is one of the weakest in the league. They're the second worst team in turnover differential. Very hard to justify you being a top 2 team when you're that low in turnover differential. Their ground game this week was a solid performance, all things considered. Again, they had a couple of those big rushes that kind of inflated their stats, but it was one of the better weeks for the Stallions all season. Matt Corral, of course, was solid on the ground, but the story is going to be how healthy is Corral, because now you have Case Cookus coming in, the chef. Will he be able to continue playing? Well, last year didn't do all that great with the showboats. How much of that was the O-line? How much of that was him? Again, we didn't see much. He made one really solid deep pass, but again, he only threw the ball 2 times. It's hard to view it, but for me, I think number 3, the Stallions kind of deserve that spot. So, Stallions 3. Biggest strength is their return game. Another issue for me and why I'm putting him here is that finding a bigger strength was also pretty hard, because yards per game on defense, they are a weaker team. So when it comes to biggest strength, it ain't their defense, it ain't their offense, but their return game is actually pretty solid. They lead the league in kick return average at 28.8 yards, and their punt return average is number 2, with an asterisk that you could argue surely number 1. San Antonio, of course, had the punt return touchdown, so that stat got insanely inflated. So really the best overall team is the Stallions at both return stats. And that's a really solid thing. It helps you get better field position. Again, a lot of that is also thanks to Michigan helping him out a lot in week 2. But kind of hard to see something else. Again, I could see a deep shot be their biggest strength, because it's every week they're getting that big play to a Deion Kane type of player every week. And that's always something huge. Again, that's what Marcus Sims did really well for the Panthers the past 2 years, was being that guaranteed 40-yard bomb. But for me, got to go with the return game. Now, the number 2 team in the league is going to the Michigan Panthers. Yeah, they're back at number 2, weirdly enough. It's been a weird journey. Again, it's what I say about this league not having a true number 1 team, because even Michigan at 2 doesn't feel right. It's just Birmingham at 2 doesn't feel right. Arlington at 2 doesn't feel right. Look, the biggest issue for Michigan is the fact that two of their wins are against a winless Showboats team. One of their wins was against, at that point, a winless Brahmas team, and then the Stallions lost against their only good team. Now, the big difference, and what people don't seem to understand, is the Stallions game was very different than the Brahmas game. The Stallions game, they still were trotting out Danny Etling too much. The Brahmas game, once Etling got hurt, became Bryce Perkins' team, and they ran the ball more. That Panthers team plays that Stallions team, or this one. Panthers have a real shot at winning, though historically they're probably going to lose because they always lose. Again, reasons they're better than Birmingham, turnover differential, they're actually positive. They're tied for third best in the league. Even on defense, when it comes to yards per game allowed, they're the third best team in the league. And again, they're 50 yards better than Birmingham. Yes, points allowed per game, they're below Birmingham by a couple of spots. But yards per game is one you could argue matters a bit more when it comes to just how well you're making stops. And they're doing a pretty good job of that. And then yards per game on offense, they're the second best team in the league, one of only two teams with 300 a game. So very solid unit there. Again, Perkins has looked a lot better the past couple weeks. But of course, the big issue is the fact that they have played a weaker schedule. Now, yes, the Brahmas win looks a lot better now. Again, I said it then. The Brahmas looked much better under Party than they did under Wade or AJ. No disrespect to the coaching legend Wade Phillips, but they've looked better under Party than they have either of those two guys. And then they come out and beat DC now. It makes that win look even better. The win against Memphis, again, shows the difference. This wasn't the Memphis Showboats game in week 1 where the score was only lopsided because of a pick six at the end of the game. This was a blowout. This was domination. This is what you're expected to do as a good team against a bad team. Again, there's a lot of people who think that Michigan's a terrible team because they haven't had any great win, but now the San Antonio win looks a lot better. So, number 2, the Panthers, I'm not putting them at 1. I know there's probably somebody out there who's going to vote them at 1. I don't think they've done enough to earn that. I think they do have to win against, another solid team. They play the Battlehawks this week, which is kind of a weird matchup in a sense that it's the worst time to play them because if you lose, it looks really bad, but if you win, it doesn't look really good. But the Battlehawks, in theory, are still a tough team. It's a weird one, but number 2, Michigan. Biggest strength is QB play. I said 2 QB or not to QB 2 weeks ago that there was an asterisk on 2 QB for Perkins, and the asterisk was running the ball. You know what they've done since that video? Run the ball. You know why the biggest strength is QB play? Because they're running the damn ball. Perkins is the best passer when it comes to passer rating at this point in the season. He is completing almost 70% of his passes. He's got 4 TDs in the air, 3 on the ground, so 7 total versus just 2 interceptions. He has not lost either of his 2 fumbles. He's only been sacked 3 times. And he has 119 yards on the ground, with most of those being the past couple of weeks. He's been a much better player on the ground, and he leads the league in points currently right now, which of course points also includes the extra points and all that, which he scored a few. So he's the league leader in points, because remember the UFL does count passing touchdowns, so that's another big positive. He's been incredible so far, and right now, it's pretty hard to argue he's not the MVP. It was Sailors for the first 2 weeks, then after week 3 it was up in the air. Through 4 weeks, the MVP is Bryce Perkins. So again, and that's what I've said from the very beginning. The way the Panthers make the playoffs is if Perkins plays like MV Perkins. If he does that, the Panthers make the playoffs. If he doesn't, they don't. So if he keeps playing like this, the Panthers should make the playoffs and he might get MVP. Though again, it's still early in the season. We're not halfway through yet. But so far, Perkins, he's the biggest strength of the Panthers. In terms of quarterback play, he's been the best QB this season so far. And that's even despite the week 2 game, which wasn't great. So, again, 3 out of 4 weeks he's played really well. Biggest strength, QB play. Number 2, the Panthers. Number 1, the defenders. I know some people are shocked at this, but here's what it comes down to. Normally, losing to a winless team would be an automatic drop for me. But this upset I saw coming not a mile away, but I saw it coming, quite a few yards away, I guess the best way to put it. It's why I said in the Spring Into Football podcast episode, I said I was close to picking San Antonio and I might change it, and I did change it. The fact is San Antonio is a lot better than their record suggested because this team under Party is a much better offense, and it's a defense that is just slightly better. Not great, but slightly better. Again, DC's loss even here. They did have a chance to win it. They were at 4th and goal. They just failed their last play. They had a lot of penalties go against them, some debatably. So they did also almost have twice as many yards of offense than San Antonio. So in a box score stat sheet sort of way, they did kind of thoroughly beat San Antonio. Now, despite having 2 times the amount of yards, having almost identical time possession is a bad look, but still, they got 5 TFLs despite not getting any sacks. Love to see that. Overall, they lead in too many stats to not have them at 1 still. Best team in passing yards per game. Best team, which granted that's only because of turnover differential and the fact they just throw the ball all the time, but this week we'll get to that in a second. Kicking points, lead the league. Kickoff touchback percent, lead the league. Yards per game, lead the league. Third down percentage, lead the league. I mean, kickoff touchback is debatable, but the point is, they lead the league in a ton of big stats. Their defense did take somewhat of a hit, but it's still one of the best units in the league, which is just, it is a great defense. But biggest thing is Te'amu had his first really good game of the season. Ironic how the first time he actually plays well all season, they lose, yet the 3 games he played poorly, they win. I just think that's hilarious. But again, even then, Te'amu's second half, this kind of felt like a Dormade Panthers game last year. First half, incredible. Second half, not as incredible. A lot of those incompletions were in the second half. And again, he went from having a really high completion percentage to finishing at 60. Now, his ground game was impressive. Him having 10 carries for 74 yards with only a long of 12 shows that he was legitimately getting a decent amount of yards every time he ran, and he did run for a touchdown. But again, Abram Smith, man, he's just not back to what he was. This DC O-line is better than last year, and the fact that Abram Smith is still not looking well 4 weeks through the season, again, 13 carries for under 40 yards, that's not good. Especially if you eliminate the 16-yard long he had, that's 12 carries for 23 yards. That's an abysmal stat line. So, you hate to see that, because their ground game is still just not good with Smith. But Te'amu, if he plays like this next week, they should get back to the winners column. But again, this is the first really good week Te'amu's played all year. We'll see if he can keep this up. But again, for me, there's no real number 1 team in the league, but it's hard to put any other team at 1 when you have one that leads in so many stats. And that their one loss was one that was pretty easy to actually see coming. Again, the Brahmas, I saw this as a pretty easy upset. And again, even then, DC still outplayed them in yards, still got a ton of penalties against them, some debatably, I know it was a bit of rough ball stuff, and they still dominated number 1 DC defenders. Bigger strength is their kicker, Matt McCrane. Yes, he's missed a couple of field goals, but overall, he's been the second, I think most people would say he's been the second best kicker in the league, despite not being, one of the 200% guys. There's a reason he has to come on the field all the time, because this team they're not always great in the red zone and all that. And he's been a very solid kicker. He can't kick it from 50 yards. He's not the most accurate kicker, but he's an incredible kicker. The fact is their offense is not a strength overall. Again, it's too hard to view an offense. I was debating on putting their takeaway ability, which, again, if you want to put that, I'm fully for it, or defense. But I want to give some love to Matt McCrane. He's been a very solid player for the defenders, and he's been really one of the biggest reasons they were 3-0. The fact is he had to keep kicking field goals his first 3 weeks. So a lot of credit to him. Number 1, DC defenders. So that'll do it. This has been Zom Fox. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified as soon as any videos. Do note that this was Easter Sunday, or Easter weekend and Easter Sunday this past weekend. So the week review will be postponed till Wednesday because TV ratings should not be coming out until Wednesday. So I can't make the video, obviously, on Tuesday. So that'll be coming out on Wednesday. And then, of course, game picks on Friday. And then my player, or the Player of the Week award winners on Wednesday as well. Let me know down below what your power rankings are. And think about becoming a community member. We're like 3 members away from getting a 7th team emoji, so think about that. And as always, guys, have a great night.